The sirens wailed, but they were a distant, mocking song, a cruel symphony in the thick, suffocating night air. "They're not coming," I thought, a cold dread snaking through my gut. I could see the flames now, orange and furious, clawing at the walls of my home, my sanctuary, everything I had built. Smoke billowed, turning the sky into a hellish, swirling inferno. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the roaring crescendo of destruction. He stood paralyzed, a helpless witness to the annihilation of his life's work. Each crackle of the fire, each collapsing beam was a stab to his soul. It wasn't just wood and plaster burning, it was memories, dreams, the very fabric of his existence. The photos on the mantelpiece, the children's height marks etched into the doorframe, the worn armchair where he'd spent countless evenings reading, all consumed by the insatiable hunger of the flames. He'd built this house, poured his sweat and love into every corner, and now it was being ripped away from him. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, a sickening wave of nausea washing over him. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a random act of nature. He remembered the hushed whispers, the rumors of unpaid fees, but he received no notice, no warning, no final demand, only iron-fisted authority. The Homeowners Association, the HOA, those petty tyrants who ruled this gated community with an iron fist, had blocked the fire trucks. They had deliberately, callously allowed his home to burn. My home. The word echoed in the hollow chambers of his heart, a broken, mournful sound. A quick flashback, the HOA president, Mr. Sterling, with his perpetual sneer, Mrs. Abernathy, the treasurer, with her hawk-like gaze and obsession for perfectly manicured lawns, and then Mr. Henderson, the member who always tried to be the voice of reason. He seemed like a nice person but never dare enough to really take action. These were the faces of the enemy, the architects of his despair. He stumbled back, coughing, the acrid smoke burning his lungs. The heat was intense, unbearable, but the cold fury that ignited within him was even stronger. He stared at the charred remains, the skeletal frame of what had once been his haven. The stench of burnt wood and melted plastic clung to the air, a suffocating reminder of the devastation. But amidst the ruin, something shifted within him. The grief was still there, raw and agonizing, but it was intertwined with a new, powerful emotion: rage. Gone was the compliant homeowner who had meticulously followed their ridiculous rules, paid their ever-increasing fees without question. That man had died in the flames, replaced by someone else. Someone hardened, someone determined. He looked at his neighbors, whispering and scared. Some offer their condolence, others just stared. They were all afraid, like he was before the fire. He would not be silenced. He would not be intimidated. He would not let them get away with this. The HOA had overplayed their hand. They had mistaken his compliance for weakness, his silence for acceptance. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and now they would face the consequences. A fire, far more destructive than the one that had consumed his home, had been lit within him, a fire of vengeance. But that fear was gone, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. I started systematically going through every communication I'd ever had with the HOA. Emails, letters, notices. There was nothing, absolutely nothing that justified their actions. No mention of a fee that, if unpaid, would result in the denial of emergency services. It was a blatant lie, a power play that had cost me everything. They think they're untouchable, I muttered to myself, my hands clenching into fists. The anger was a physical force, a burning coal in my chest. I expanded my search, digging into online forums, community message boards. I found a litany of complaints, a chorus of voices whispering about the HOA's abuses, exorbitant fines for minor infractions, fabricated violations, threats of foreclosure. Each story fueled my rage, solidifying my determination. Then I found it, the smoking gun. A leaked internal email, forwarded multiple times, originating from a resident too afraid to come forward publicly. It was a communication between HOA board members, explicitly stating their intention to make an example of those who questioned their authority, citing the blocked fire trucks as a teaching moment. Teaching moment? I spat the words out, my voice shaking with fury. They risked lives, destroyed a home, to teach a lesson. This wasn't about money, it was about control, about crushing any semblance of dissent. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a kindly old woman who had always been wary of the HOA, approached me cautiously. I heard what happened, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's awful. I have some things you might want to see. She slipped me a crumpled envelope, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. The envelope contained even more damning evidence, documented cases of harassment, intimidation, and financial discrepancies. Armed with this, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. I had them. But that feeling was quickly replaced by a chilling unease. That evening, as I was sifting through the documents, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "You're making a mistake," a distorted voice rasped. "Drop it, walk away, or you'll regret it." "Who is this?" I demanded, my heart pounding. The line went dead. The threat was clear. They knew I was coming for them, and they were playing dirty. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and adrenaline. I felt eyes on me constantly. I started seeing unfamiliar cars parked near my temporary rental. Then came the accident. I was driving home when a truck swerved into my lane, forcing me off the road. I managed to avoid a serious collision, but the message was clear. They weren't just going to threaten me, they were going to try to stop me. "They're trying to scare you," my newly acquired lawyer, Mr. Davies, said grimly, examining the police report. "But they're also underestimating you." He was a seasoned litigator, a man who had built his career on taking down corrupt organizations. He had a fire in his eyes that mirrored my own. "I'm not scared," I answered. "I have nothing left to lose." "That's what they think," Mr. Davies countered. "But you have something they don't, the truth, and allies." He was right. I wasn't alone anymore. That realization led me to the local news station. I walked in, clutching the folder of evidence, and asked to speak to an investigative reporter. A woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression emerged. Her name was Sarah Chen. "I'm told you have a story for me," she said, her voice neutral. "I do," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "A story about corruption, abuse of power, and a fire that should never have happened." I placed the folder on her desk. "And I have the proof." "The HOA, correct?" she asked. "Yes, but you need to understand this goes deeper than what it seems," I said. "Tell me everything," she said. Her tone changed. Now she was serious, her full attention on me. This conversation with Sarah marked the beginning of the next phase, the transition from solitary struggle to a public battle. It was the bridge between my personal quest for justice and the larger fight to expose the HOA's corruption to the world. The seed of hope planted amidst the ashes was beginning to sprout. "This is explosive," she finally said, looking up at me. "If this is all true, this is bigger than just a local HOA dispute. This is systemic abuse of power." "It is true," I affirmed, my voice unwavering, "and they need to be held accountable." Within hours, I was sitting in a dimly lit studio, the red light of the camera blinking like a watchful eye. Sarah, now transformed into a composed, incisive interviewer, guided me through the story. I recounted the night of the fire, the HOA's refusal to let the fire trucks through, the subsequent threats, the accident. I presented the evidence, piece by piece, building a case that was impossible to ignore. The segment aired that evening. The response was immediate and visceral. Social media exploded with outrage. Horror and justice for the burned home trended nationwide. Comments poured in from homeowners across the country, sharing their own stories of HOA tyranny. Other news outlets picked up the story, adding their own layers of analysis and investigation. The carefully constructed facade of the HOA was crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. "You've unleashed a firestorm," Mr. Davies, my lawyer, said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "They can't ignore this. They can't hide." "Good," I say. "Let them feel what I felt." But the HOA wasn't going down without a fight. Their initial response was silence. No official statements, no press conferences. It was a vacuum of denial, a desperate attempt to ride out the storm. But I knew it wouldn't last. Then the counterattack began. First, a carefully crafted smear campaign. A shadowy figure, later identified through some digging by Sarah Chen as a PR consultant with ties to Mr. Sterling, the HOA president, started leaking information to certain online outlets, painting me as a disgruntled homeowner with a history of violations, a troublemaker who had brought this on himself. "They're trying to discredit you," Sarah warned me, showing me a particularly vicious article. "They're trying to control the narrative." Next came the physical threats, escalating in intensity. My temporary rental was vandalized. My car tires were slashed. One evening, a group of masked men cornered me in a parking lot, delivering a chilling message. "Back off, or next time it won't be your house that burns." "They are desperate," Mr. Davies said. "They are cornered animal right now." But the HOA had underestimated two things: my resolve and the power of the network I had inadvertently built. Mr. Davies swiftly filed a defamation lawsuit against the PR consultant and the outlets that had published the false information. Sarah Chen, using her investigative skills, exposed the link between the consultant and the HOA, further damaging their credibility. And then, the most crucial piece of evidence surfaced. The fire department, pressured by the public outcry and the ongoing investigation, released an official statement confirming that their trucks had indeed been blocked by the HOA security gate on the night of the fire. Their statement directly contradicted the HOA's feeble attempts at denial. "Checkmate," Mr. Davies said, a grim smile playing on his lips. "They're finished." The release of the fire department's statement was the turning point. It was the undeniable proof, the irrefutable evidence that shattered the HOA's last line of defense. The public outrage intensified, the media scrutiny became relentless, and the legal noose tightened around their necks. The transition was complete. From a personal tragedy and a solitary fight, it had become a public crusade, a battle for justice that resonated far beyond the gates of my former neighborhood. The storm they had tried to weather had become a hurricane, and they were caught in its eye. The residents, who had once lived in fear of retribution, now found their voices. Fueled by the media coverage and the undeniable evidence, they came forward in droves, sharing their own horror stories of HOA abuse. Mrs. Gable, my elderly neighbor, emboldened by the shift in power, publicly revealed years of harassment and extortion by the HOA. Others followed suit. A single mother threatened with eviction over a child's playset deemed unapproved. A veteran nearly losing his home due to lost payment records. An elderly couple fined thousands for an unauthorized mailbox replacement. The stories were remarkably similar, painting a pattern of systemic abuse, greed, and a complete disregard for the well-being of the community they were supposed to serve. A town hall meeting, organized not by the HOA but by the residents themselves, became a cathartic outpouring of anger and resentment. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a sense of collective liberation. "We were afraid," one resident confessed, his voice trembling. "But seeing your name stand up, seeing the truth come out, it gave us courage." Meanwhile, the investigation, spurred by the public outcry and the mounting evidence, intensified. It was no longer just about my house, it was about a pattern of criminal behavior. Investigators began digging into the HOA's financial records, and what they found was far worse than anyone had imagined. Mr. Davies, through some well-placed contacts, discovered that the HOA was just a small cog in a much larger machine. Mr. Sterling, the sneering HOA president, wasn't just a petty tyrant. He was connected to a network of shady real estate developers and corrupt local officials. The HOA fees weren't just being used to maintain the community. They were being funneled into offshore accounts, laundered through shell corporations, and used to fund lavish lifestyles for Sterling and his cronies. The mastermind, as the media dubbed him, was revealed to be a man named Arthur Finch, a shadowy figure with a long history of fraudulent schemes. Sterling was merely his puppet, a willing participant in a much larger game of corruption. The arrests came swiftly. Sterling and the other HOA board members were hauled away in handcuffs, their faces plastered across news channels nationwide. The images of their perp walks, their expressions of shock and disbelief, were a stark contrast to the smug arrogance they had displayed for so long. The trials were swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming. One by one, the former HOA board members were found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and a host of other charges. Sterling, facing decades in prison, attempted to strike a deal, offering to testify against Finch in exchange for a reduced sentence. I attended the trials, sitting in the courtroom, watching the people who had tried to destroy my life face the consequences of their actions. There was a sense of closure, of vindication, but also a profound sadness. So much damage had been done, so many lives disrupted. Justice was being served, but it couldn't erase the past. It wouldn't bring back my home, not as it was. But I saw, in the eyes of others, my old neighbors, they all felt the same. The sense of victory was stained with the scar left behind. The final scene of this act played out not in a courtroom, but in the offices of the now-defunct HOA. The building, once a symbol of their power, was empty, stripped bare. The files, the records, the instruments of their control were gone, seized as evidence. The reign of terror was over. The empire had fallen. And from its ashes, a new community, scarred but stronger, was beginning to rise. I stood before the empty lot where my home had once stood. The debris was gone, cleared away, leaving only bare earth. It was a stark reminder of what I had lost, but also a blank canvas, an opportunity to rebuild. And this time, it wouldn't just be a house, it would be a symbol, a testament to resilience, to the power of fighting back. The insurance money, finally released after months of bureaucratic wrangling, helped. But it was more than just the money. It was the support of the community, the neighbors who had once been silent, now offering their help, their time, their resources. We were building more than just a house. We were rebuilding connections, forging a bond that had been broken by years of fear and intimidation. I found myself thinking back to the night of the fire, to the feeling of utter helplessness. But those memories, while still painful, no longer held the same power. They were reminders of how far I had come, of the strength I had found within myself. Each new wall raised, each window installed was a victory, a small act of defiance against the forces that had tried to destroy me. A quiet strength, a calm determination, slowly replaced the old fire of revenge. The community, too, was undergoing a transformation. The fear that had permeated the neighborhood for so long was dissipating, replaced by a tentative hope, a cautious optimism. A restoration fund was established, using the recovered funds from the HOA's illicit activities to help those who had suffered the most. Families who had been financially drained by bogus fines received compensation. Those who had faced eviction threats were given assistance. It wasn't just about the money, it was about restoring dignity, about acknowledging the harm that had been done. Town hall meetings, once dreaded events filled with HOA dictates, became forums for genuine dialogue, for shared decision-making. Old grudges were aired, apologies were offered, and a sense of collective purpose began to emerge. People were finally being honest to each other. There were no more secrets, only share struggles. The most significant change, however, was the complete dismantling of the HOA. There would be no new board, no new set of rules imposed from above. Instead, the residents voted overwhelmingly to adopt a system of self-governance based on transparency, mutual respect, and community consensus. "We learned a hard lesson," Mrs. Gable said during one of the meetings, her voice now strong and clear. "We learned that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We will never let that happen again." The legal framework governing HOAs in the state also came under scrutiny. My case, widely publicized, became a catalyst for reform. New legislation was proposed, aimed at curbing HOA abuses and protecting homeowners' rights. The fight had extended far beyond my neighborhood, sparking a national conversation about the unchecked power of these organizations. The future, while uncertain, was undeniably brighter, built on the foundation of hard-won lessons and a renewed commitment to community. The seeds of change had been sown, and the harvest was beginning to appear. My case, the story of the fire and the fight against the corrupt HOA, became something of a legend. It circulated online, in newspapers, and on television. A cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of community resistance. Other homeowners, facing similar struggles across the country, reached out, inspired by the outcome. For me, standing on the porch of my newly rebuilt home, the peace was profound. It wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was a deeper sense of belonging, of connection. The nightmares still came sometimes, flashes of fire and the feeling of helplessness, but they were less frequent, less intense. The new house, built on the same ground, was more than just a replacement. It was a reclamation. It was a symbol of defiance, of resilience, of the enduring power of the human spirit. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a vibrant contrast to the darkness I had known. I can finally breathe again. The air always feels fresh now, not the scent of burn and ash of before, but of flowers, of neighbor cooking, of life. The HOA was gone, its legacy a warning. But the true legacy was not the destruction they had wrought, but the community they had inadvertently created. By pushing us to the brink, they had forced us to find our strength, our voice, our unity. They had tried to break us, but they had only made us stronger. And that, I realized, was a victory that could never be taken away. The future was ours, built not on fear, but on trust, on collaboration, and on the unwavering belief in the power of a community united. The shadow of the HOA was gone, replaced by the bright, enduring light of a new dawn.